Next, we'll be looking at, amongst other things, the latest offering from Blackmagic Design. No, for change, it's not a camera, but a 4K ATEM production switcher. And Neil Anderson from NMR was here earlier to give us the lowdown on this and a few other products to assist your workflow. We've had our fair share of audio issues on Broadcast Show, and I think everyone has experienced loudness issues in the past as a TV viewer. Anthony Wilkins from Junger will be talking loudness, what it means, and what we might need to do about it. Finally, we have the world-famous top 10 viewed NAB interviews. These went online within a few hours of being filmed at NAB earlier this month, and we drew a line under the views at lunchtime today, and the winner is on the show, so stay tuned. Now, as many of you know by now, we are taking Broadcast Show on tour, and I'd like to play you a short promo video, so have a quick look at this. The Broadcast Show tour, it's coming to a city near you, and if you haven't already registered, then go to broadcastshow.com/tour. You've seen the pretty pictures, you may not have heard it, but go to the website and you will see a link at the top left of the Broadcast Show website menu, and there you'll be able to register and see what's going on. Now let's get to our first guest. It's time to talk 4K. And with me, I have Steve Owen from Quantel. So hi, Steve. Thanks for coming on.
You're very welcome. Good evening.
Good evening to you. Now, we met at NAB, and I mean, it was 4K everywhere at NAB.
Was.
It was. You just walked in, the first thing you saw was 4K this, 4K that. I think first, tell us, you guys from Quantel have been around a while.
Thanks.
You know the industry. I'm not saying you're old or anything like that, of course not.
Experience.
Experience. Should we go for experience? You've got a lot of experience in the broadcast industry. What is it about 4K this year?
The key thing about 4K now is that it's moved out of the upper stratosphere of our industry, and it's become a practical technology, really, that can be applied throughout our industry. You've got a range of 4K cameras at a range of affordable price points. The technology in post-production from Quantel, obviously, and from others, is making 4K a practical proposition. We can carry that quality right the way through. And really exciting, you know, potentially we can even deliver that quality now.
Right.
So we have 4K display devices, not just in our theatres, but potentially we're going to be having 4K display devices in our homes. All the big electronics manufacturers, CES, we're showing 4K display devices. So we've got this lovely line of technology that enables us to make better quality content than ever before. And one of the things that we believe at Quantel is that people really do care about good quality content. 4K changes that again. It changes the game. It changes the rules. It's going to be an exciting time as we all relearn how to do things. But that's what this industry is all about.
So hopefully everybody understands what 4K is, but in case they don't, just explain exactly what is 4K. It's a resolution thing, isn't it?
It's a resolution thing, and it also acts as a proxy for a whole load of things.
Right.
You need to check what people are talking to you about when they're talking about 4K. 4K as a film, digital format for scanning film has been around for ages, and that was kind of 4096 by 31112 pixels. It was a 4:3 shape. but that's sort of changing now.
Right.
What we have now is the kind of 4K that digital capture cameras use, so that's 4096 by 2160. Then we have the 4K that the consumer displays I talked about display, which is actually 4 times HD.
Right.
So it's slightly different. It's 30, 39, whatever twice 1920 is, 3840 by 2160. So slightly different formats. What it is, it's a lot more picture information, which means you can put it on a lot bigger screens. And you can get much more immersed in the content. At the same time as that, people are also trying to capture more of the dynamic range to give people more flexibility in post. So traditionally, television and even film has been perhaps 10-bit, but now we're moving to 16-bit.
Right.
So we're giving people a lot more flexibility about what they can do with these images. It makes for much better content, much more immersive content, but it is a range of different things, and you need to check with people about what they're talking about.
Yes, absolutely. So you mentioned about more immersive. Is this the reason that broadcasters are now getting more interested in 4K? Is there other reasons? I
think there's a couple of reasons that broadcasters are seriously looking at 4K, and it is an interesting development because up until now broadcasters have seen the film resolutions as being something that's a bit separate, and maybe they do it when they're doing a co-production to make a film for cinema distribution. But what we're seeing now is the potential for 4K to make better quality HD, so we can make a better quality high production value drama, documentary, that kind of stuff, which looks fantastic on an HD screen. But that's really the tip of the iceberg. I think the interesting thing there is people are starting to look at 4K as being able to do different kinds of coverage to perhaps give you much more of an immersive feel, for example, at a sports stadium. The idea of 4K is it's not about actually being able to see, higher resolution detail. It's about bigger screens. It's about getting more immersed in the content. Some people have compared 4K to 3D. For the same kind of feeling. If you have a bigger screen, you feel like you're there, you feel like you're immersed. So broadcasters, sports has traditionally driven broadcast technology, and it's certainly a high value area of broadcast technology. Broadcasters invest in it. They're looking at what they can do to improve their coverage even more. So 4K potentially adds value to broadcast coverage.
So when we're talking about immersive with large screens, what we're saying is at a football stadium, you can have a screen 4 times as big as it currently is and still have the same quality of image.
Absolutely. Most people say sit, 9 or 10 feet away from their TV. And at that distance, quite honestly, you can't even resolve, your eye can't resolve, even with my good glasses, can't resolve even HD resolutions on a 40-inch TV. But of course, as the TV get bigger, 50-inch, 60-inch, and the 4K displays people were showing were like 84-inch displays. So, okay, we're going to need bigger houses and bigger rooms, but that'll come. The technology will become affordable, and you will be able to have, for these kind of big event-based things, much better, much more immersive experience. You feel like you're there, and that's basically down to having a wide angle of view. If you're just looking at a screen here and you've got your fireplace there and somebody out the window there, you're not immersed in the content, whether it's 2D or 3D. But if you've got a big screen that's taking up most of your angle of view, then you really feel like you're there. But to do that and to deliver the quality of picture people are used to on HD today, we need to up the resolution. And that's why we're going towards 4K or Quad HD, whatever you want to call it.
So it's not just a matter, though, of, I'm just going to go and get myself a 4K TV. I mean, we're talking about moving an awful lot of data around here. And so there must be new challenges with dealing with 4K material. Yes,
absolutely. I mean, it's really easy to say things like 4K 60 frames a second. It's quite a bit harder to actually deal with them, with the reliability and the quality and the speed that broadcast customers need. Typical traditional kind of film 4K is about 10 gigabits a second. 10 gigabits a second translates to 3 or 4 terabytes an hour of storage. So that's, a reasonable chunk of stuff. If we're pushing 4K on to higher frame rate to deliver more like a broadcast experience, which is where, a lot of the interest is about, then we're upping that data rate by 2.5 times. We're talking about 25 gigabits a second. We're talking about 10 terabytes of storage an hour. This is a big challenge to move around. It's a big challenge to streamline workflows that can handle that. But, big challenges are, again, good for us. They're challenges. We can apply the latest technology, and we're not doing this by ourselves. The latest PC hardware can handle that kind of data rate. NVIDIA push on with their Tesla processors, things that can do. They've just released their Kepler-based Teslas. nearly three times more powerful than the previous generation. So this tech that can actually deal with this huge amount of data is becoming available.
Yeah.
It's not saying it's easy, and certainly 4K 60 frames a second is still a bit of a challenge, but it's there. It can be done. It's practical. It's not something that you have to spend hundreds of thousands of dollars to get. You know, a Pablo Rio from Quantel software is $30,000, and you're off. You're there, and it can handle 4K 60 frames a second, or at least it can when we do the next version of software coming along in a few weeks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I have to say that.
Quite right. I was going to prompt you for it anyway, but you stuck it in there. I'm quite impressed. So, I mean, we've been talking 4K. I walked past your stand, and I think you're probably showing off a little bit. There was a slightly higher res screen going on there, wasn't there?
There was higher res content.
Higher res content
yes,
going
absolutely.
on there. Playing with.
And again, you know, 4K isn't necessarily the end.
Yeah.
Certainly, Japanese broadcaster NHK, in conjunction with people like TV Globo in Brazil and the BBC in the UK, are interested in seeing where they need to get to. And, you know, perhaps for any conceivable size of screen, what is the resolution that will mean that we never need to increase the resolution again?
Yeah.
And they're talking about 8K.
Right.
So we built with Pablo Rio a very scalable architecture, and one of the R&D guys did think it would be quite fun just to see if he could power up a Pablo Rio, inject it with enough steroids and throw enough NVIDIA Keplers in there to handle 8K. And the scalability of the architecture was such that we could.
Right.
So it was just real fun to show on a desktop PC that you can go along, you know, okay, search the internet and buy, and throw in some standard off-the-shelf processing. We were playing back 8K in real time off the disks. So 8K is 4 times 4K.
Yep.
So now we're talking about 100 gigabits a second, pulling that off the drives in real time, displaying it, manipulating it, adding lookup tables to it, and then sizing it down to essentially a 4K proxy for display on the screen in real time. This tech is there. You know, it's a fantastic time for the visionaries in our industry to kind of think, well, what can we do with this? How can we employ it? And you've got to give NHK credit for, you know, talking about 8K. And you know, BBC and NHK shot the Olympics, some of the Olympics in 8K. It's they're pushing the boundaries, and you know, I think we deserve to rise up to that challenge. It's a good thing that they're doing, and it'll be interesting to see where we can go with this. But it's probably the ultimate format.
Yes.
On any conceivable size screen, it's difficult to see why you might need more than 8K.
Sure. So that's well in the future. 4K looks as though it's here to stay?
I think 4K for sure is here to stay. The digital theatres with the digital projectors, they're either 4K now or they're upgrading to 4K. It's a practical upgrade. It's not a throwaway projector usually. The quality difference in the theatre between 2K and 4K is, you know, eminently noticeable. If people are shooting content today, then they're probably shooting it on a camera that's capable of 4K. So post-producing it in 4K means they've got a future-proof asset. They've got something that they can use now and in the future. 4K is here to stay. I think, you know, some people perhaps have said, you know, compared 4K to 3D. And, you know, a couple of years ago, everyone was really excited about 3D. I was included. And 3D is part of our visual landscape now. And I think we'll see the same for 4K. 4K will become, you know, just a standard part of our visual landscape. And, you know, we'll have 4K displays at home, and we'll be watching on, you know, 400 by 300 displays on our phone. And the content will span and look great across all of them.
Brilliant. Steve, thank you for enlightening us a little bit. Now, if people want to contact you guys to learn a little bit more how they can start dealing with 4K and obviously the systems that you guys offer, where can they find and contact you?
Quantel.com. All the details are on www.quantel.com. Or they're welcome to mail me at steve.owen@quantel.com.
Steve, thank you very much for coming on. It's been much appreciated. So there's Steve. Hopefully you've learned a little bit more about 4K. It was everywhere at NAB, and their 8K system that they had was just amazing to see at their stand as well. And of course, we saw lots of cool products at NAB, and you can see our interviews with over 60 of these on the NAB page of BroadcastShow.com. Now, stay tuned for the top viewed clip a bit later. We're going to have that at the end. It's worth seeing. In the meantime, we grabbed Neil Anderson from NMR to chat over a few products that stood out and what to watch for in the future. He came in earlier today, and here's what he had to say. Thanks, Neil, for coming on. Now, Neil, you are from NMR. Do you want to tell us a little bit about NMR first and what it is that you guys do?
Sure. Thanks for having us, John. So NMR is stands for New Media Research. We've been around for about 20 years now, supplying post-production and broadcast equipment. So we're a value-added reseller and systems integrator based in central London.
Right. Now, we're going to talk about a couple of things. One of the top topics of today's show has been 4K quite heavily. Now, you guys deal a lot with Blackmagic kit, and they brought out a new ATEM, which is a 4K system, as far as I understand. Do you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure, yeah. The ATEM 4K switcher is 8 inputs, SDI and HDMI. The big pitch is obviously 4K that was at NAB. So Blackmagic bringing out an 8 input switcher with effects, video player, still store for under $2,000 is quite a big deal, I think, in terms of bringing affordable 4K solutions to the market.
So for those who don't know, tell us a little bit about the ATEM systems itself. Whereabouts will this sit in the line of the ATEM switches?
Well, I think it's an interesting one because they obviously have their existing HD products. So it's going to fall really with the larger of their production switches, the 2ME that they've got in terms of input functionality. But what's nice is you can use either of their control panels. Right. So really depending on how much control you want over it during the live event.
Yeah. And if you wanted, I'm trying to work out at the moment where you would use a 4K switcher. So what scenarios would you use this in?
I think sort of sports and live events in particular, music festivals, football stadiums, that sort of scenarios where there is going to be a real benefit to having 4K, large outdoor screens, for example, for the audience. So having the best cameras, highest resolution screens, and therefore being able to mix true 4K and output that in real time is going to be a big deal, I think. Right.
And am I right in saying that this will accept 4K over the new 6G HD SDI?
Correct. So Blackmagic, in their infinite wisdom, always get ahead of the mark and have adopted 6 gig SDI, which is being ratified, so I'm reliably told, towards the end of this year. Right. So yes, it'll be kind of ready for a new single input standard, as opposed to multiple 3 gig SDIs, which is a pain. There's no real need for that many cables.
Right. So you can actually send the full 4K image over a single coax cable.
Exactly that.
To use multiple.
Exactly. So one coax cable or HDMI 1.4A as well. So connecting up to more sort of consumer display systems as well, and some of the more affordable cameras.
Gotcha. One question I know I'll probably be asked is, can this take standard HD inputs as well as 4K inputs?
Yes.
Can it mix them yet?
I would imagine it would be HD only. Yep. Obviously, it's not quite shipping yet. Sure. So some questions are going to no doubt be ironed out when it does become available. We're told it'll be in the next few weeks. So it remains to be seen. I don't imagine it's going to be able to mix and match SD and HD and 4K in one, but in terms of output, you can certainly output and down convert.
Right, gotcha. So if you haven't got a 4K system at the moment, something you're looking at possibly moving to, you could take one of these in at the moment, use it with your normal regular.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'm saying your normal regular full HD system, but an HD, and then you can upgrade later.
Yeah, I mean, HD suddenly become old hat. We've finally got there in the UK, and all of a sudden it's redundant. No, I mean, HD is going to be around for a good long time. What's interesting is obviously, in terms of 4K, you've got very affordable 4K cameras now as well. Everyone's clamoring, and there were a lot of announcements at NAB about cameras, including Blackmagic. So with the vision mixers and then things like H.265, we've got affordable ways of delivering 4K as well at lower data rates than you might have expected with things like H.264.
Certainly something to keep looking at and watching to see what happens with it.
That's right.
Yeah, I mean, we were actually at NAB ourselves, and we were looking around, and 4K was the thing this year.
Absolutely.
Everyone was talking 4K. What I did notice when I was walking around was the Tools on Air stand that you had there, which looked very interesting. Yeah,
they've been around for a couple of years now, and for those people who aren't aware of them, they're an Austrian developer of Mac-based software for broadcast. Yep. So their pitch is TV station in a Mac. So you can take off-the-shelf Mac hardware, Blackmagic cards, Kona cards, and some of their Thunderbolt breakout boxes as well, and you can literally turn your Mac into a multi-camera recording system, video playback for live events, real-time graphics, and also a fully automated TV channel broadcast server with automation and scheduling.
Right, so I've seen a lot of people, they're trying to put a small TV station together, and they can buy all these pieces of hardware, but it's then controlling it all, putting it all together, and this is what Tools on Air allows you to do.
Absolutely. So the beauty of taking a very sort of a software-based approach, is you can source Apple kit from anywhere in the world. Blackmagic and AGA hardware is widely available, so it's quite cost-effective, firstly, but also very easy to get hold of the technology, use the Tools on Air software, and build these sorts of integrated software solutions that can talk to your editing systems like Final Cut or Premiere Pro or Avid, and really build an entire workflow around a broadcast solution, really.
I'm just noticing we're showing a picture at the moment. This is the Premiere Pro?
That's right.
So how does that work?
So one of the new announcements from NAB was the ability to do multicam recording directly into Premiere Pro.
Right.
So rather than using a separate application, for example, or a separate piece of hardware, you can literally record all your ISOs directly into Premiere and do what's called chase editing. So as soon as the files hit your disks, you can start chopping up and cutting down your program for highlights or for reversioning and things of that nature. So just a really smooth, elegant workflow. The editor doesn't have to fiddle around in different applications or fiddle with different bits of hardware to actually grab hold of the streams and start editing.
So, and this piece of software, is this a individual you can buy, for example, just the Premiere Pro, if I get it right, plugin for this particular feature?
No, actually,
Tools on Air whole system?
It's part of the Just-In application, which is their ingest application. So if you specify you need it for Premiere Pro, then you license it for that machine, however many channels of ingest you want to take into it, and you have access to that inside Premiere.
Excellent. So long as obviously you've got the right amount of input cards on there, the right type, and you've got a disk subsystem that can take the speed of whatever to record.
And you can record into MOVs, QuickTime MOVs, ProRes, for example, or Avid MXF formats, or standard OP1 codec as well for MXF. So plenty of flexibility on codecs, resolutions. They've got 4K for those who want it as well, but early days in that regard. But certainly in terms of flexibility and cost-effective way of putting together a TV studio and a broadcast station.
Excellent. So if they want to find out some more about Tools on Air, and because obviously you say it's a suite of applications and they can sort of mix and match and put it together how they wish, can that be found out on your website? Yeah,
I mean, we're their UK master reseller and systems integrator, so we put together all of these systems for people. Right. We can take existing hardware if people have it, but we can supply all the necessary hardware, software installation, support and training. So yeah, nmr.com, you'll find information on Tools on Air, but also their own website, which is toolsonair.com.
Brilliant. One of the other things we're talking about, obviously, ingesting footage creates a lot of files. Yeah. One of the other systems that you look after is it Cantemo?
Yes.
Which is media asset management.
Yeah.
And there's a lot about media asset management at the moment.
Everyone seems to have an asset management solution now.
Tell us a bit about your...
Yeah, so we took on Cantemo a couple of years ago, I think with the sort of death of things like Final Cut Server, which really got people's attention in terms of asset management. One of the limitations with the Final Cut Server is that Apple really didn't do a huge amount of development with it. And ultimately, when they discontinued it and products like Cantemo and their portal asset management solution came to market, it seemed obvious as a sort of natural successor to the likes of Final Cut Server. What's interesting about Cantemo is that they've come from enterprise asset management. Their background is working for one of the other big enterprise class DAM companies, and they sort of started up Cantemo to offer a solution that starts small and you can scale right up. So they've got customers from 5 users to thousands of users in multiple sites. So it's a very scalable solution, but because it's web-based, uses HTML5 browsing, you don't need any special plugins. You can access it from anywhere in the world. You've got things like rough cut editors and an annotation tool and plugins to Premiere and Final Cut, for example, as well. And then obviously it'll manage your metadata, create proxies, and migrate files from disk to tape and things like that. So it really ties the whole thing together. And the other thing we've done is we've integrated Tools on Air with Cantemo Portal as well. So one solution that we've put together for a broadcaster is the ability to take a live broadcast program, for example, and record that program output into using Tools on Air into Cantemo. And as that's being recorded, it's creating a proxy of the high-res asset on the fly. Users can then browse the proxy, edit it as it's being recorded, and then send chunks of those edits to be converted to files for video on demand. So the big issue that a lot of broadcasters have got is taking the live program and getting it online as quickly as possible. Probably similar situation to you guys, with the broadcast show. So by being able to ingest it, edit it while it's being ingested, and then deliver files to be converted to VOD, H.264, for example, as the program's being recorded, you can just minimize the turnaround time that much more. So that's something that we've done as far as systems integration goes.
Brilliant. And finally, before we run out of time, I've heard about you guys have been talking a lot with Elemental.
Yes.
As well. Tell us a bit about that.
So Elemental, they're from Portland, Oregon, and they have kind of pioneered GPU accelerated transcoding and encoding of files. And that's becoming a big problem now, especially with 4K and H.265 around the corner. So yeah, they built appliances. So they have two main products, the Elemental Live, which is a live encoder, and then the Elemental Server, which is a file-to-file transcoder. And it's proving very popular amongst some of the broadcasters who've got huge amounts of content that they need to prepare for VOD or OTT delivery, as well as live events where you've got lots of different versions you need to deliver. So whether it be iOS devices, Android devices, Flash, Silverlight, and things like that. Because it's GPU accelerated, they get a lot more streams out of the box than traditional CPU encoding or transcoding products. So it's proving very popular. They did a huge amount of work around the Olympics. So all of the BBC iPlayer streams, whether it was live or on demand, I think NBC used it, Eurosport, HBO, Warner Brothers. There's quite a lot of the sort of the big players who've taken it on. And we were appointed recently to take them on into the UK simply because they were getting so much demand that they needed someone to actually cover the whole market as far as be able to deal with inquiries and get loan systems out there and people to have a look at it.
Brilliant. Neil, that's exceptional. You guys provide a lot, clearly. If people want to find out some more information about everything we spoke about, the ATEM, Tools on Air, Cantamo, and of course, all the Elemental, what's the website?
nmr.com.
Nice and simple.
Yeah.
Neil, thank you very much for coming on. Much appreciated.
Pleasure.
Thanks to Neil for coming in. It was very interesting talking to him. And of course, you can find out everything about what he was talking about and all the other services on their website, which should have been up on a link, I believe, on that video. Well, moving on. Next, we've got Anthony Wilkins with us from Junger. Hi, Anthony.
Hello.
Now, we are going to talk about the subject of loudness.
We are indeed, yes.
Now, everybody's going to say, loudness? What, when we're talking about loudness, what are we talking about?
Okay, well, we're talking about a very subjective thing. We're talking about how we as people perceive sound levels to be. So it's not something you can easily measure.
Right.
And if you play some content to a number of different people, they won't all agree on whether they think it's loud or not.
Yep.
And there's many factors that come into place when we determine whether we think something is loud or not.
Yeah.
The environment we're listening in, whether it's a quiet environment or a noisy environment, the kind of content we're listening to, the age of the person, the overall level, the frequency, even the mood they're in. So it's a very subjective thing. It's not easy to quantify.
So, I mean, we were walking around NAB and there's a lot of people talking about loudness as if there's some kind of issue with it at the moment in broadcast. Is there something going on with loudness at the moment?
Absolutely, there is indeed. I think as a TV viewer, everybody has probably experienced the loud commercial syndrome.
Yes.
Where program cuts to the adverts and suddenly it's perceivably much louder than the program that came before it.
Yep.
Even between programs, different channels are not always broadcasting at the same level. So as you hop around, there's inconsistency. And it's become the fact that inconsistent loudness is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, source of viewer complaints to broadcasters. So it's high time that something was done about it. So over recent years, there's been a real awakening of the industry to think to itself, well, this is a problem for viewers, and we really need to find a way to tackle it. So that's ongoing. It's not solved by any means, but a lot of the pieces of how to solve the puzzle are there now.
So there's clearly a problem.
Yes.
People are complaining about it. This is something that you say is subjective.
Yes, it is.
How can you measure something that's subjective and everybody's impression of loudness is different?
That's something that in the past wasn't possible to do.
Yep.
Meters that audio engineers would have been familiar with in the past, VU meters, peak program meters, or maybe we should call them quasi-peak program meters, they just measure a simple electrical voltage, easy to do. Loudness cannot be measured that way.
No.
However, there is now a reliable and consistent way to measure loudness. That's based on a standard that was published by the ITU some years ago. It has a very nice long name, ITUR BS 1770. It has subsequently been revised through versions -1, -2, and -3 is now the current one.
Right.
Most people just refer to it as 1770,
Yep.
and it's probably easier to keep it like that.
So this is a new standard.
It's a relatively new standard, and it gives a way for an instrument, if you like, to behave like our own hearing system.
Right.
I mean, it consists of two major elements, I guess. First of all, there's a pre-filter stage, so-called K-weighting filter,
Yep.
which is a combination of a second-order high-pass filter with a high-frequency shelf. And what that does is that compensates for the shape of the human head
Yep.
and how our auditory system works. And secondly, it takes a power-based measurement over time for each channel, sums them together, performs a logarithmic calculation, and there you have a value for loudness.
Right. So you found a way of measuring it.
Yes.
They've put a standard together
Yes.
that people
What-
should
What-
mix to, should...
Well, before that, what does a loudness measurement give us? We
Yeah.
should say to people,
Yes.
because maybe not everybody's totally clear. The result of that loudness measurement gives a value, and the unit that loudness value is measured in Europe,
Yep.
we talk about the term LUFS,
Right.
loudness units relative to full scale. So now we have a way to measure loudness repeatedly, and every loudness meter you can find works on that same basic
Sure.
1770
Yeah.
principle, or one of the variations. So now we can do that repeatedly. So we can all agree on how we measure loudness, but can we agree on what is good loudness?
Right.
Well, yes, there is a standard. In fact, as standards tend to be, there's more than one.
Yep.
Most of them are very similar. But if we talk about Europe, then there is a standard published by the EBU, which is known as R128, Recommendation 128.
Yep.
And that suggests a way to manage your loudness in a consistent way. And it talks about really three key elements.
Yep.
It talks about program loudness, which is an average loudness level across an entire program, whether it's a commercial or whether it's a feature-length movie. And the important thing here is that it talks about average loudness.
Right.
So within a program, it's good to have louder parts
Yes.
and quieter
Yes.
parts. If there's a car chase and cars crashing into each other, we expect it to be loud.
Yep.
If there's whispering going on, we expect that to be quiet. So there's a suggested target for average loudness, which is -23 LUFS,
Right.
plus or minus 1. The second element is maximum true peak. Now, old-style peak meters, because of the integration time, you couldn't guarantee they were really catching the high-frequency fast transients.
Yep.
They could appear as intersample peaks.
Yep.
So loudness meters working to the current standard use oversampling, so they can more reliably capture those transient peaks.
Yep.
So there's a recommendation for a maximum of -1 dB true
Right.
peak. And the third element is loudness range. This is, in simple terms, the difference between the loudest and quietest parts of the content. The upper and lower few percentages are excluded. And there's no right or wrong for that. But as a broadcaster or somebody emitting content, you should be aware of the loudness range you're
Right.
sending out,
Yep.
because what's suitable in terms of a loudness range for somebody with a high-end home theater and very good speakers may not work so well for the person with the TV and the small built-in speakers.
Right. So we've got the guidelines, we've got the standards.
Yeah.
We now know we can measure it.
Yes.
Yet still, I hear very loud adverts relative to the programming that was before it.
Yep.
Is there some legal requirement? Is there some legislation that says you must conform to this now?
In most of the world, no.
Right.
In the US, they're the exception at the moment. They did pass a law called the CALM Act, and broadcasters are now compelled to conform to that.
Right.
So they have to be in compliance, otherwise they risk fines from the FCC.
Yep.
The rest of the world, no, there's no legislation as such. What each country tends to be doing is self-applying
Right.
the standard.
Yep.
And depending which country you look at, some are more advanced at it than others. Some countries, for example, Germany, Switzerland, Austria, have employed it fully.
Right.
And it tends to work around the system that broadcasters get together and they agree, yes, we're going to follow it, and we're going to make the change on a particular date, so they all go in sync.
Okay.
And that's important because if you look before the loudness standards were available, if you measured typical loudness output from an average TV station around Europe with a loudness meter, you'd probably find somewhere in the -18, -17 LUFS range. So for a broadcaster to make the change to the new standard, potentially there's a 6 dB drop in their output.
Right.
And sometimes there's a reluctance, especially in a country with a lot of TV stations, to be the first to do it.
Gotcha. So
they tend to be gathering together and joining forces and making joint decisions about it.
So assuming that we got a broadcast station that decided, yes, I'm going to start conforming.
Yeah.
Is there tools to help them do it? How does that work?
There's a lot of tools. We can probably break them down into two major sections.
Yep.
Non-real-time tools that work in the file domain and real-time tools that are typically hardware units that can manage loudness in real time as it's passing through the chain. The non-real-time solutions have an advantage. If you're working in the file domain, you can scan the entire file much faster than real time, so you can see where the problems are, and you can then easily fix those problems by just applying a simple scaling factor, and that's great. The non-real-time boxes, it's more tricky to do that. But it's possible, and we do it very well. We have a number of products that work well in that arena. And in the case of a real-time processor, typically it will be a piece of hardware that sits in the broadcast chain towards the end, probably just before the DVB or ATSC encoder, and all the content will pass through, and that is out of specification will be measured and will be scaled or dynamically processed as required, and the output is then consistent with that target average.
Right. So a lot of obviously broadcasters use outside production companies. They've handed over, like, you're doing this, you're doing this, and you get different levels coming in from all these different production companies.
This is a challenge. So what we talk about is the concept of loudness management. And I use the term management specifically because a lot of people will talk about processing. Oh, you can process that and the loudness will be okay. Well, you don't want to process unless you really need to. So the philosophy that we would promote is to really address the issue as early on as possible in the chain. So if you're creating content for broadcast, then these days, good practice is to mix to the target loudness level. The old days, you would mix and stay within a maximum peak level. Or as long as I don't exceed that level, I'm going to be okay. But the problem there is if you mix everything to a consistent peak level, depending on the dynamic range of the content, the perceived loudness will change. Wide dynamic range content, like classical music, will appear to be quieter. Short form, highly compressed commercials will appear to be louder. So mix it right from the start. The second opportunity, if you're a broadcaster receiving content from an external source and you're going to ingest it, there's an opportunity to check and verify and correct if necessary. And the software-based non-real-time tools do that. Finally, right before transmission is the last chance to sort things out. So our recommendation is to have a real-time processor in your transmission chain, but use it selectively. If you're receiving content that either you've originated yourself or you know is good, then the unit should be forced into bypass. And all the good real-time hardware boxes can integrate into your automation system. They can be controlled through GPIB contact closures, or through any one of the HTTP-based automation systems. So when you know the content is good, put it into bypass. If you've got content that you know the loudness and you know it's wrong, then you can use the box as a simple scaler with the true peak limiting. And if you've got no idea what the content is, then you force it into full-on dynamic control, leveling, and true peak limiting as well.
Gotcha. You cleared it up. I now have some kind of understanding of loudness. Now, obviously, you guys work for Junger Audio, and you specialise in loudness. Is one of the areas that you specialise.
We do. Just a very brief intro to Junger for those that are not so familiar with us. We're a German company. We were founded in 1990, so like Quantel, we've been around for quite some time. We are an audio company only. All we do is audio processing. Our roots were in dynamic processing, expanders, compressors for studio and for broadcast. But of late, loudness has been a big focus for us, and we have a range of products that can help you deal with all those situations we've just talked about. Our products are hardware-based real-time processors. We have solutions for stereo, for 5.1, and we have a modular solution for very high density. So we have, for example, a 3U rack. You can populate with 16 cards, and you can deal with 256 channels of audio in a single 3U rack. So very, very efficient use of rack space.
That's brilliant. Now, if people want to find out, they've thought, right, okay, loudness is an issue, I need to look at it.
They do.
And they think, you guys do real-time stuff. We want to put one in our chain. They want to contact you. How's the best way to get it?
Well, a couple of ways. Our own website, junger-audio.com. You can find product information, white papers, technical background and description. You can also find contact point for the person for your region, myself or one of my colleagues. Or specifically for those in the UK, our partner here is Aspen Media. Right. And their website also is aspen-media. aspen-media.com.
Yep, brilliant.
And they can help you as well.
Anthony, thank you very much for enlightening us on the field of loudness. Much appreciated. Thanks for coming on. So that was Anthony. I now have a better understanding of what loudness is. You see a lot of people talking about it, and now I kind of understand what we're talking about, which is great. So thank you for Anthony for that. Now, moving on, it has come to the point of the show where we better do that top 10 countdown of the NAB most viewed interviews. So let's line it up. Here we go. Here is the top 10. So at number 10, we have Live View, and they were talking about their new Smart Grip product. At number 9, it's Cobham, and they were talking about their mini RF transmitters and encoders, and very impressive they were too. Next, in at 8, we had iMovix. And the first of 2 entries at number 7 is JVC, talking about the GY-HM 650 firmware upgrade. In 6th place was Inmarsat. They're talking about their Global Express and Explorer 710 systems. In at number 5, they always sneak in there, it was Sound Devices. And number 4, it was Brainstorm Multimedia with their Aston 3D set system. Sneaky little Australian scraped in at number 3. It was Jeremy from Atomos talking about the new Samurai Blade. Followed by, just missing out the top spot, it was Blackmagic talking about whatever they came up with on everything. Number 1, JVC got in there with the GY-HM70 camera. They had 2 in there. Well, as I said earlier, we counted up the views at lunchtime today. And the funny thing is, and this wasn't a fix, I assure you, our final guest who we booked in was Kris from JVC to talk about the GY-HD70 camera, which came up number 1. So rather than show you the clip of the 2-minute clip that we did at NAB, we've got Kris here in person talking about the real thing. Have a look at it. So Kris, welcome.
Hello, John.
Thank you. Now you have just won our competition for most viewed video on YouTube, so congratulations.
Brilliant, thank you.
And this is a complete fluke that you were booked to come on the show anyway and talk about the camera that you've actually won the competition with, and it's this one here. It's the GY-HM70.
That's right, yep.
Now we just did a very short 2-minute video clip on there. It's obviously got a lot of people talking about this camera. Do you want to give us a little overview of this camera and what it's all about?
By all means. So this was launched at NAB.
Yep.
What we looked at, JVC haven't got a huge portfolio of camera products, but certainly one thing we felt we didn't have, which we should have, was a low-cost shoulder mount camcorder. So this is what the factory have come up with, GYHM70. However, they've done a few special things,
Right.
As the factory seem to be doing a lot
Yep.
at the moment. So again, ergonomically, shoulder mount camcorder, very lightweight.
Yep.
It's about 2 kilos.
Right.
Yeah. Well, we start from the front end. We have a 16 times lens.
Yep.
It's nice and wide.
Yep.
29mm, and it's an f1.2 lens.
Right.
So the camera, when they designed the camera, one of the things they wanted the camera to do was to perform well in low light environment.
Yep.
Okay. The camera, the lens has a traditional rocker on here. Iris control and everything is here.
Yep.
Yeah. So you've got full manual iris control, auto exposure, etc. I mean, most things you'd expect with a professional camcorder.
Sure.
The camera, I mean, I must say, obviously identifying that we needed a product in that range.
Yep.
The reason was to cater for maybe videographers,
Yep.
The wedding guys,
Yep.
corporate and education.
Yep.
So working way through the camera, it's got a nice eyepiece viewfinder.
Yep.
Yeah, nice and bright, very clear. Indeed, it's got a decent LCD
Sure. Yeah.
on the side here.
It looks good.
Yeah. All touchscreen.
Right.
Really easy to navigate.
Yep.
In tradition with our other solid state camcorders, it's recording onto SD media.
Right.
So it's class 6 or class 10 cards. Towards the end of the camera, you'll notice something which is quite unique, is the fact that it has a dual battery mount
Yes.
bay. This battery is the same battery we use in our GYHM150,
Yep.
our small compact
Yep.
CCD camcorder. And with 2 of these, you can actually run this camera for about 6 hours.
Right.
So quite useful. And they're hot swappable
And
as well,
so
John.
you can keep the camera rolling. So particularly good if you're in a wedding situation, something's
Definitely.
going on, and you think, oh, battery's running out. You can swap
Yeah,
out.
I mean, funny enough, I was speaking to a chap only this morning, and he does a lot of Asian weddings,
Right.
and typically they run quite long.
Yes.
So it was one of the features he really liked and was quite impressed with. The camera also gives you a number of outputs.
Yep.
Yeah, on the back here, on this panel, you have a triphono output.
Yep.
Okay, so traditional AV type outputs. You also have HDMI
Right.
here as well, so you can do an uncompressed
Excellent.
live feed from the camera. Now, what also makes this camera absolutely unique in this price point, and we'll talk about it in a moment, is the fact that it gives you 1080-50p.
Right.
So it's not only 1080-50i, you've got 1080-50p.
Okay.
The sensor, I must say, is a single sensor.
Yep.
It's a newly developed 1/2.3 CMOS sensor.
Yep.
And it's been, I suppose, tweaked, if you like, to perform
Right.
better in low light
Yep.
than your typical sensor off that size.
Sure.
It's also back illuminated,
Gotcha.
which helps that process. You've got a mic holder here. You don't get a mic with the camera.
Sure.
It's not XLR, it's mini jack,
Yep.
which again is quite typical of camera
Yep.
of this ilk. But you have other, rockers on the top,
Sure.
record buttons. Really comfortable, really easy to use.
You mentioned shoots on SD card.
Yeah.
It's got 2 slots.
It's got 2 slots, so you can do instant backup.
Right.
So you can go from whatever you're recording on A will
Yep.
instantly be on B,
Gotcha.
or you can go from A to B to B to A,
Right.
continuous recording.
Yep.
So you've got clean media.
And as far as the format that it records in.
Yeah, it's AVC HD, progressive, up to 28 megabits per second.
Yep.
So, most, if not all, NLEs will accept that.
And yeah, I mean, it does look very good. They've thought of little things like, I know that looks like a little speaker where your ear would be. And,
Absolutely.
And, just little tweaks like that just make life a little bit nicer for the operator. So this was shown at NAB.
Yep.
It's the first time we had seen it. We got dragged over to have a look at it, and we were quite impressed there.
Yeah.
As far as pricing for the UK is concerned, what are we looking at?
So it's currently under £1,200.
Wow,
Street price.
it's quite a lot for a lot of camera.
Well, listen, 1080-50p,
Yeah.
16 times lens. In that form factor, there is nothing else.
As far as it's just got me thinking. As far as frame rate goes, so what's the different frame rates that this can work at?
So it's 1080-50i or 1080-50p.
Brilliant, impressive. From a £1,200 camera.
Yeah, you're getting a lot for your money.
Yeah, absolutely. You can see why we got a lot of views on our YouTube channel as soon as people suddenly started seeing that. So that's brilliant. Now, when we were there, the main camera that we were actually going to look at was the 650.
Yep,
my HM650.
got one
which
down
you have
here.
got. We can
Yeah.
just swap it over.
Swap this over.
Now, I mean, this wasn't newly announced as a camera itself at NAB.
No.
But you have done a massive firmware upgrade for it.
We have.
Which we covered quite in depth on the video.
Yeah.
But for those who haven't seen it, do you want to give us an overview of what you've done to this beast of a camera now?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, there's a lot,
Yeah.
John. So, I mean, I would advise people to watch the video as well,
Yeah.
because I think that's 10 minutes alone,
Yeah, yeah.
actually. But version 2.0
Yep.
is the firmware upgrade. It's going to be available towards the end of this month, perhaps early next. Still waiting for a confirmed date.
Sure.
The first thing it does, and this is for the 650,
Yep.
is enable the camera to do live video streaming.
Right.
Okay, when we first launched the 650, we did promise the end users that, you know, tip of the iceberg,
Yep.
watch this space, there's more to come.
Yeah.
So on the camera, on the 650, you have a USB port at the back here.
Yeah.
In fact, I've got in here, actually at the moment, a little Wi-Fi dongle.
Oh, okay.
Wi-Fi, 3G or 4G,
Yep.
or a LAN connection, you can actually transmit live. So the camera has a built-in encoder,
Okay.
H.264 encoder, and you can do it at variable or a number of different resolutions.
Yep.
You know, starting from SD
Yep.
up to full HD, up
Yep.
to 5 megabits per second.
Wow.
At the moment.
And with that streaming, you can stream to locally or to some service provider on the web.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, what we demonstrated on the stand was a number of ways of doing it. You can stream, if you like, a point-to-point, or you can stream to a network, and then using something like VLC Player, that does the decoding on a PC basis. Or, obviously, in a broadcast environment, you'd stream it back to the control room.
Yep.
The control room would have a decoder of sorts that takes that into an SDI, because you're going from data
Sure.
then to
absolutely.
video.
Yep. Brilliant. Now, as soon as it's obviously wireless enabled, there's a load of other things you can do as well, other than just streaming. What are some of the other things?
Yeah, I mean, what you can also do, what we've created is a web-based OCP for the camera. So, like a traditional full-size operator control panel you'd find in a studio environment, we now have that as a web-based tool.
Right.
So, via any browser, you dial into the camera, and it gives you complete control of the camera. A typical example, it could be a VJ, a chap in the field, or someone out there in the field who's having some problems with the camera or the settings. You can dial into that camera remotely. You could be the other side of the world. It doesn't matter, as long as you've got a connection to the camera. And you can then change the white balance, the iris settings. You can put presets in there, change color temperatures, everything you can do on the camera. You can now do remotely. What's also useful about that connectivity is the camera gives you MXF metadata, AS10. I could be a director, I could be someone in a control suite saying, do you know what, I need this person to do this in the field. I can send metadata to the camera as well as retrieving it from the camera. So it's a bit of a two-way communication between a desktop and a camera.
And so effectively, if you, in let's say a small event situation, you had a couple of locked off cameras up in gantries or something like that, you've got complete control. You can white balance them all. You can get them just how you want it without having to
focus, the lot.
Very impressive.
Yeah.
Go for it. Go on.
Yeah, I mean, the other part of this version 2 update is, if you like, the current version, the 650, has the ability to FTP a clip, a file, wherever you want to send it. So, as it is at the moment, you do your shoot, you then choose the clip you want, and you then send it. Now, depending on if you've done it as a proxy file, so a lower resolution file or a full HD file, and depending on your upload capability, will depend on how long that actually takes. What we've put in version 2 is you can now FTP the file whilst you're still recording.
Right.
Yeah, so the camera doesn't become redundant. You can also clip the file. So you can do an in and out on the file in the camera. So you've got a 10-minute video, but you only want 1 minute, and you can FTP that file instead. It creates a brand new clip for you.
Very impressive. Now, this is just the tip of the iceberg, really, of what's happened in the new firmware upgrade. And as I say, we've got a video online on the Broadcast Show channel. But you guys are also coming on the Broadcast Show tour.
We are, yes. We're all booked in.
Hopefully showing this and many other cameras as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've shown both cameras, and what we will also show on that tour is actually the live streaming.
Right.
and then show you the quality of it.
Absolutely.
So I'd encourage everyone to, come along.
We saw it at NAB and it was very impressive. So yeah, they should come along the Broadcast Show tour. Obviously, you can find out where that is at the website. I spoke about that earlier. And if people want to find out information before then or can't make it to the tour, what's the website to go to have a look at it?
It's jvcpro.co.uk.
Brilliant. Kris, thank you very much for coming on.
Pleasure.
Pleasure
Thanks,
as
John.
always to talk to you. Well, I assure you that was not a fix. Kris was booked, and there you go. You got some insight into the GYHM 70 and, of course, that fantastic 650 upgrade. And don't forget, we did do I think it's about a 10-minute video on that 650 firmware upgrade, and you'll get a lot more detail on that. And, of course, come along to the Broadcast Show tour, where, as he said, they will be showing them. Right, you may have noticed that we've been using some different mics this show. If you have noticed, we are. We have these for a few months. They're from DPA. They are the Define Single Ear Omni headsets. They're 110mm boom variety. So we're going to see how they do for the next 3 months. So let us know what you think of the sound on our show. I believe Sound Network, who are the UK DPA distributors, are coming in soon on one of the up-and-coming shows to have a chat about all things mic in general. Now, just to finish, just to remind you, to stream this show this month, we're using the two-way system. Now, we've had a two-way system on our roof for some time. It's been the standard consumer two-way system, and it's been doing very well. But we thought we'd try an upgrade, and we've upgraded it to the two-way news spotter system. If you don't know what the news spotter system is, then obviously you can just search that on the BroadcastShow.com website, and you'll see all sorts of video about it. But just to give you a quick oversight, basically what you can do is you can book some time with two-way, and you can get a period, let's say 3 hours, 2 hours, 1 hour. You can say, I want this much upload speed, I want this much download speed, and you get that at a 1-to-1 contention ratio. So you know you're going to get exactly what you paid for up and down, which makes it fantastic for streaming and is used a lot all over Europe by broadcasters, so they know they're going to get exactly what they need to stream. So we've been streaming it via their news spotter system. This is the first time we've done it. Hopefully you've had a nice, reliable stream. And again, please let us know. You can either get us on Twitter, which is @BroadcastShow, or send us an email at broadcastshow.com. I can't remember what it is. I think it's anything at broadcastshow.com, something like that. It'll come through to us. Live at broadcastshow.com, and that's why I wear an earpiece, so people can talk and tell me what I need to say. So live at broadcastshow.com. Any suggestions about the show, anything you like, you don't like, you want to see in the future, email us, tweet us. We will do our best to accommodate you. Just to finish up, we really have to thank a load of people, because as always, everything that we've got here is lent to us for us to test, to play around with, so you can see what's being used in the industry, and we keep changing it just so we get some idea of what new equipment is like. So, of course, a big thanks to AutoQ, to Vinton Serialite, Ionaro, Cash Media, Unicol, Telestream, Stream UK, Tarium, Satellite Communications, and, of course, our friends at Black Magic Design for sponsoring this month's show. Finally, I mentioned the Broadcast Show tour. We are being joined by Jonathan Howson and Rick Young, plus a host of manufacturers and exhibitors. So if you'd like to come along and learn, see and try all the different things from lighting, cameras to editing, then please visit broadcastshow.com/tour and register for your place. It's going to be fun. In the meantime, thanks for watching. We will either see you at the tour or on our next live show. Thanks very much.